Today's episode is brought to you by extraneous uses of the number 2.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I'm your host, Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. How are you?
I'm doing
How was your holiday?
well. It was exciting. Exciting.
Little traveling for you, right?
Oh, I mean, it's a normal amount of traveling that I do on most holidays, but there sure were 40 people in a house that should not have 40 people in it, and more kids than I ever want to be around. Which, for what it's worth, is one, but there was more than one child there, so
Right.
yeah, not the best. But what about you, man?
Oh, it was a good time. Got to see all my family, obviously, everything like that. But now I've got nieces that are away at college and things like that, so they come home and it's nice. It's it's really distressing when the kids that grew up while you were in college, and you know what I mean, like are now in college themselves. But nonetheless, it feels super old, man. But it was great to see him, obviously, and great to just spend time with the family. Like Thanksgiving to me, I'm not even a big like turkey dinner fan, but it's just I mean I don't dislike it, but like stuffing carries the meal to me. Don't at me. You can't change my mind.
I'm a gravy person.
Stuffing's the best.
I feel like
Gravy's super good. Yeah,
stuffing is underrated.
Literally covers up anything you don't like about Thanksgiving dinner, and just makes it okay.
Yes,
but I mean, it's about like just sitting around on the couch, hanging out with your family, eating food, and watching football. So, like, how much better of a holiday can you possibly get for me?
Here's my sleeper pick for Thanksgiving. Now that we're on the tier list for Thanksgiving food, cranberry sauce is my sleeper pick. I think you fly under the radar with cranberry sauce, and it can carry you.
I mean, they don't sponsor us or anything, but I have a feeling you're listening to the Spitballers podcast.
I have no idea what that is.
Oh, okay. Well, check it out because they drafted Thanksgiving side dishes.
Oh. See?
But anyway.
Cranberry sauce is a sleeper pick there. I think you can get
it. Was a first-round pick, but it was by the guy that hated Thanksgiving and was throwing the draft to prove a point.
See, that is certainly throwing because you need to get your value out of cranberry. Cranberry sauce is not... I'm not going into it. I don't care. We do have stuff to talk about this week, which is awesome. Let's talk a little bit about all the good stuff going around in the world of High Noon Podcast. Of course, Blackwatch Report keeping the midnight oil a burning. 2 episodes this week, or an episode and an interview. They had an awesome interview with a member of a team from the Middle East division, which recently got announced as a possible thing that can happen or something like that. I don't know. Watch the Blackwatch Report to find out more on that. For sure. Always great to listen to them. Of course, they do have their own iTunes and Spotify feed, so make sure that you're following them there. Around the Payload is going to be coming back at some point where there's some parts moving around. Stuff's coming together. Once we get it, it's going to happen. Don't worry. Got a lot of people on deck here. We're just Around the Payload is more in vacation than the other shows. It's just the nature of it. It's just how it is. It'll come back and it'll be fantastic.
But the people want it now, Blevins.
The people always want it
now.
That's great. I mean, I want one now too. It'll be coming back. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. And last bit of housekeeping news here is that we got the new patron hype. We got Adam S. at the $5 level. Huge shout outs to Adam S. Thank you so much for the Patreonage. You can always head over to patreon.com/High Noon Podcast to support the show. Should you so desire, get a sweet little, at the $5 level, you get a sweet little patron tag in Discord and get your message to one of us somehow, and we will read it on the show. So
Also, just a bit of a side note here, not actually important, but just want to say this week marks the 3-year anniversary. So we've officially been kicking around for 3 full years. We started up right around Thanksgiving.
Overwatch.
We started up right around Thanksgiving, so it's been obviously a blast. Just thanks to everybody that listens, all the patrons, everybody in the Discord, everybody not in the Discord. Literally, if you hear this right now, thank you for everything you've done for the show. Even just listening helps us out a lot, so we really appreciate it.
And this just in, Adam S is Hippo, who is a big Discorder, big Discorder, big game night player. Really good main tank player as well. So huge shout outs to the one, the only Hippo. Thank you. And so let's move on here to
Overwatch Today meme of the week.
This meme of the week this week is, I don't know. It's definitely not supposed to be a meme, unless it is, in which case it is brilliant.
Top shelf, 10 out of 10.
Top shelf meme. So I don't even know how many other people are going to even think that this is a meme, but I certainly do. So the opening day, the opening match of Overwatch League for Season 2 is going to feature...
Is rumored to feature.
Okay.
I don't want to say it like it's fact, because I don't know that we heard it from a legitimate source.
Rumored to be. The Shanghai Dragons versus the Huangzhou Spark. So you may be thinking, well, how is that meme?
It's not a meme, Blevins. That's just a match on the schedule.
That's just a match that's happening. Wrong. Well, right, but not completely right. It is certainly a meme, because this means that because Shanghai is playing against another Chinese team as the first match, we automatically, Shanghai gets to determine their fate here as potentially not being the first Chinese Overwatch League team to get a win in Overwatch League. They had a full season to do it. They had an entire season to do it, and they might not get it if they lose this first match.
That awkward moment when your Super Bowl is your first matchup, because that is pretty must win for the team. I've got to say, it would be a pretty embarrassing tagline for them to be like, God, they could theoretically be the fourth at that rate, right? Like if they lose that match, we don't know what the rest of the schedule looks like. Could be their only matchup of the week. They could literally be the last of 4 Chinese teams to get a win in Overwatch League with a full season head start. So clearly something they want to try and avoid.
Well, I mean, the team that wins that match will have the most wins in Chinese history for Overwatch League. So it's literally a historic match for so many reasons. But yeah, in my mind, that's meme worthy. So thank you if this is true. Thank you to the Overwatch League scheduler, because that is beautiful. Spoiler alert, it was me. I made the schedule this year. But let's
also made the Reddit post with the news.
also fabricated the news. No, it wasn't me. It might have been me. Okay, let's move on here to
news.
Got a couple of roster announcements here. Finally, A, happy that we got the roster announcements. B, very upset that we didn't get all of the roster announcements, because this episode could be the episode where we start the preview of Season 2 in full force. We get to talk about all the expansion teams. We get to talk about this, that, and the other thing, all this stuff. Instead, we have another game that we're going to be playing, which we'll get to in a second. But we don't get to talk that much about the expansion teams. We're not going to go.
We should tease it though. If for whatever reason you're not super into the expansion teams, I don't know. Everybody's pretty into all of them.
Or if you've heard it enough times, we do.
But right, or if you've already got this information, make sure you stick around though. We're going to be playing win, lose, or draw with the Season 1 teams, recapping the roster moves they made and discussing whether they're better, worse, the same, whatever. Going into the next season.
Yes, it's basically the leaders and feeders from Foul Play, kind of.
Low key is a little bit.
A little bit. not really at all like that, actually. It's just a game inside the game is what it is. But we have the Guangzhou Charge lineup here. And that, of course, includes at the flex roll, we've got Hotba. We have the one and only Eileen at DPS. We have Happy at DPS. We've got Kib at DPS. Nero also at DPS. We've got Rio at tank. And then we have Chara, Only Wish, Shu, and 1J Lee all at support.
Yeah.
Solid squad there.
A nice little squad. Very notably, this is a Chinese team with a steady mix of South Korean, Chinese, American, and
British.
not Canadian, but
UK.
British players on it. Yeah. So theoretically, this is going to be English-speaking comms.
It's 2 Chinese, 5 Korean, and 1 American and 1 UK.
Yep. And we know, or at least have to assume, Hotba does pretty well with his English since he was on the Philadelphia Fusion last year. Had that whole season to get used to that, kind of being in a comms outside of his native language. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I just want to say props to Guangzhou for just kind of having the foresight to say there's no reason, like I've said it countless times on this podcast, there's no reason to region lock yourself. Listen, if you go to sign the best 8 to 12 players that you possibly can and they're all from one region, great, that's not a problem. But to go out of your way to exclude talented Western or Korean or Asian players just doesn't make any sense when we already know it's possible to work them in. So do it, get them acclimated, get it figured out, get the system in place. You don't have to be in a hurry to play these guys. So maybe Kib and Nero don't have much of a chance to get onto
Nero
the
is
stage right away.
Apparently 17, so there's going to be some amount of waiting time for him.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see exactly, what they end up going with. I do expect the predominantly Korean and Chinese starting 6 from them, but nonetheless, I think this is great. If nothing else, they have assets now that they can send to contenders, depending on the status of all the contracts, which we don't know for sure. I would think Nero and Kib would be very likely to be on 2-way deals, so they have the option to send them to contenders. Or just wait for somebody to need something, right? Like we know Nero's a real, a pretty solid DPS player. So maybe wait until an English-speaking team needs a DPS player, and then give him a call and say, "Hey, remember that guy that I outbid you for in free agency? You can have him. So come and get him." And then Kib, I think, was another reactionary play from the World Cup. The big performance of Team UK there, really demonstrating how important that event is for contenders players that maybe didn't distinguish themselves amongst other contenders players. It clearly gave him a stage, and he did the most with it, and good for him. He's found his way into the league.
Yeah, for sure. Here's a question for you. Of these players, just off the top of your head, who do you think is going to be the star of this team?
Eileen, because we've got a good song.
Had to do it.
Yeah, and I honestly think as well. I knew the meme was coming and set it up, so I can't take too much credit there. But I do think he is, in a serious answer to the question, I think he's still the correct answer there. We've seen him be very big on stage in important moments, World Cups in the past, things like that. So he's a very high skill player, and I'm really glad he was able to find his way in this year. I think he just became age appropriate, so he wouldn't have been eligible last season. But
yeah, I'm just I'm wondering why he wasn't on World Cup team this year. Interesting. I don't know.
Might have already known he was getting signed, and just there's a lot of reasons. It could have been temporary visa reasons. There's a lot.
All sorts of stuff. But all I know is that if he gets better and better, I got that signed right? shirt.
Hall of Fame. The spot's waiting for you.
Hall of Fame. Yeah, I'll bring it when in his induction ceremony. I'll go there and be like, "Hey man, I had your shirt," and he's be like, "Okay." So Good stuff. We're also getting that was really deadpan there. So since we're definitely going to be talking about it for the next team as well, let's talk about the colors and the name and the.
I think we did I think we had the branding for them before last episode.
I don't know if we had like the preview video. I feel like I don't know if we had the actual colors. Maybe we did.
Well, we can just do a very quick one on this one in particular because we're not 100% sure. But I really like the colors here for them. I think they're different. They stand out. I like dark color themes as well. If memory serves, they're a very dark color theme. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that branding in particular. The logo, I'm pretty sure we talked about this because I remember kind of going off on the logo.
Oh yeah, the Gatorade. Yeah, you're right. You're not.
Yeah,
you're
they're just Gatorade with even the same lightning bolt that's probably in the Gatorade logo somewhere.
Yeah,
logo is bad. Colors are great.
Colors is good. Yeah, it's got like turquoise, I guess, is one of the colors. It's like dark navy blue, like kind of blue gray. I don't even know what that color is. Seafoam, maybe like a muted seafoam, and then like a vibrant seafoam color. So definitely interesting colors. And like the logo is cool, but it just doesn't seem original. It's the Chinese knockoff. Yikes. But yeah, no, I like it as well. But I figured we're probably going to mention it for the next team, so we might as well get there. Just for those of you who don't like this drop, sorry, it's going to happen a lot this season. Anytime he's mentioned, it's going to get him.
Be ready.
Be ready for that. Okay, moving on here. We've also got the Huangzhou Spark roster was also announced, and boy, am I going to butcher a lot of these names.
Yep.
We've got at the tank position, we've got Gushu and No Smite.
I think it's Gushui.
Gushui.
I'll try.
I tried.
Gushui
and No Smite at tank.
I'm guessing too.
We've got Adora, Rhea. We've got Adora at DPS, Rhea at flex, Bazi at flex, Gods B, not Gods from old. What team did he play for? It wasn't Envy. Did he play with Envy? I don't know.
I think he was just on Envy, if I'm remembering correctly.
Not that Gods, but also a DPS player. We've got IDK and Revenge and BB at support, and then we've also got Crystal at DPS as well. Do we know anything about this roster?
Yeah, it's I mean, so Gushui is really kind of the star here as far as I'm concerned. His play, I think, has the potential to be up there with literally every single main tank that was at the top of our list in season 1. I think his ceiling is that high. So whether or not he reaches that and gets there, but I mean, mechanically, and this is something the World Cup viewer taught me, where maybe I would have been a little more iffy about him, things like that. I think he would have, anyways, the World Cup viewer gave us all the information we need to watch his perspective, know just how mechanically sound he is. He's an absolute beast. So as long as they can support him, and I think the names around him are good enough, we know Hotpa's good enough to play on this stage. We know he's really flexible and he can be a big asset.
The other team.
Am I just reading the wrong one? Hold on, did I get them mixed up? I totally did. Yeah, okay. Okay.
See, Spark, Charge, and Shock, they're all the same word to me in my mind.
I'm going to absolutely we're going to do that a lot, so I would just go ahead and be used to it.
Just get used to it, just like you should get
But yeah, no, otherwise it is basically an amalgamation of a couple of teams from Korean contenders, so it's going to be a matter of whether or not that works out. We all know my opinion on rolling contenders rosters and just bringing them up. It's risky, it's iffy, especially combining two of them. I think is a little worse than maybe what like Shanghai's doing and just calling up almost the entirety of Kongdu Panthera. But nonetheless, I think they're in a decent spot as far as expansion teams go, I think I've got them billed out to be potentially one of the better ones. And again, this is discussing ceiling more than anything. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I think especially, Godsby and Gouchway, I think, are the ones that really stand out to me that I remember from what I've seen of their contenders regions. I think they've got a really good chance, and I'm just confirming, but they're a combination of X6 Gaming and
Sean GW in chat is saying it's 3 teams, so there's
three teams.
Okay,
Yeah,
there's probably some
few
sprinkles of others as well. Makes sense. The one thing I want to note about this roster is that we don't have. I mean, we do have contenders players, but like we've said multiple times, big difference, big jump between contenders and Overwatch League, and there isn't that sort of anchor of a Overwatch League player. I mean, granted, Hotba was not like a star player whatsoever for Fusion, but nonetheless, like Hotba has played and has been in the league for a year. Was with the team.
Big playoff moments too.
Had
I wasn't
good moments.
Wasn't enamored with him in the regular season, but the playoffs he did do very
right. Like I'm saying, he wasn't a star, but he definitely was a player. It's not like he was Milton and never saw the stage. Hotba, even if, while I imagine Hotba will be playing, but even if Hotba didn't play, you're still having that like anchor, that almost like team captain in a way of like, hey guys, this is how you run a season. This is like how we do it. This is how we do scrims. It's like, hey, we can't be up until 3 a.m. doing this. We can't, like, all this stuff that has nothing to do with the game. All these guys know how to play Overwatch. I'm not worried about that at all. It's the, hey, we need to not do 12 hours of scrims. Hey, I know you guys are watching with your mouths drooling, wanting to be in Overwatch League. We're not doing 12 hours of scrims a day, 5 days a week. That's not going to happen, okay? We need to pace it out. We got burnt out when we did this. We can't stay up this late. We should have, maybe there's a morning ritual or routine that they go through, something like that. Like having that player, like when you jump up to that next league, having everyone be kind of freshmen. You don't want a team of all freshmen unless you're the what was that, the Michigan team from like the 90s or whatever, in college basketball, but that's a different story.
This is why
you don't want all freshmen for the most part.
Yeah, to just add on to your point, this is the exact same reason why when an NFL team drafts a new quarterback, they usually go get the 40-year-old, gray-bearded, journeyman that's been around forever, that's played with countless Hall of Fame level quarterbacks. Whether they've been any good at all throughout their career doesn't actually matter, because you're not going to it's the coach's job to make sure they play up to their best potential. But a leader, as another player in the locker room, can do a lot. Can help in a lot of other ways. And like you said, that's something Hotba can certainly. Yeah.
So Charge, even though it's only one player, I think is from that aspect is going to be in a good spot. Spark they may run with it. I mean, obviously all the teams from season 1 did, they had their thing going, but I think going from 0 to 1 year is probably a huge jump in terms of that experience. So we'll see. I hope the best for them. Now,
should we argue about colors for 2 minutes?
I was going to say the topic of discussion here. You are a heavy critic of the cotton candy pink and baby blue color schema of the Honcho's Park.
I wouldn't even say I'm like a heavy critic so much as like I don't get it. It's not. I don't like it. It's not for me. To me, when I want my sports team's brand to like be intimidating,
right? In
some way, right? Like even the ones that aren't directly intimidating. I'm thinking like Uprising. It's like positive on their end. You know what I mean? It's something. And I guess the name Spark doesn't not do that in its own way.
Like a neutral thing.
But am I supposed to be intimidated when I look across the stage and see cotton candy uniforms? And like, now there's a lot to like about it. You could, everything else aside, they're easy to look at colors, like easy on the eyes, right? It's a pleasurable thing to see, even if it's not for you. And it's so different, right? Like it's just super, super different than everything else.
So many
you
jerseys
stand
will
out.
Be sold.
in that perspective. I think ticket sales or jersey sales are going to be off the charts for them. So I think that's a big boost there. Basically, I think every female Overwatch League fan is going to own one of these jerseys. Plenty of males will too. Calm down, don't at me. But
or Adam.
But like in a way that like every female that watches Overwatch League flocked to Shanghai to support Kaguri and things like that. Right. Like when you have a feminine themed color scheme like this, I think you're playing into that and you're trying to get it. Also, I low-key love that they stole Runaways color from them. Yeah. Like, you didn't get in. Ha ha. I'm taking it from you. Like, I'm stealing your brand. I think that's really funny. I'm not being a Runaway fan. If I was a Runaway fan, I'd probably be upset about it.
Yeah.
But even they're going to be torn because they want the colors, the colors that they've grown to love on their Overwatch League jerseys. But it's not for me. I don't care, but I'm not. Also, we discovered since we originally talked about it, when I was telling you, I think it's hideous.
Yeah.
I've come to confirm, like, I see the colors wrong on their announcement. Like, whatever it is about the shades, I'm colorblind. So, like, I think it was the blue, just was like, I was seeing it in a completely different shade. And then when we got the picture of the jersey with Zoe wearing it, it was like, oh, that's like a completely different blue to me. Yeah. And it made a little better sense. So I think it was just like a weird colorblind thing with the shade as to why I was like,
you were like, I don't get why everyone's calling this cotton candy. I'm like, have you seen cotton candy before?
I'm like, I sure have. That's why this doesn't make. And then I saw a different version of it, or like on the jerseys itself, and I got that aspect of it a little better. So the colors meshed with each other a little better than I originally thought they did. But yeah, it's super funny. I very rarely have problems with my colorblindness, but it's been like in 2 weeks now. It's been like two things, like artifact card colors, and then randomly this team's branding just melted my brain and I couldn't get past it.
Yeah. Well, I, as a person who is currently wearing a floral pattern hoodie, I like I like gaudy stuff that's like over the top and like it's dumb. It's like it's not dumb, but it's dumb. It's like it's supposed to be that like over the top, like, whoa, this is pink because it's pink. It's a statement.
Just dress like Elton John every day. And get
exactly.
It over.
Yeah, I'm going to. I like it, and actually, what you guys should do, I will link the article in the notes. Friend of the show, Nicole Carpenter, wrote an article for .esports about how it's not only about this, and actually, I don't even know how much. I think at least some of it is about this, but also about the like pop-up stores and like how all the teams doing this different merch, like tying fashion into, esports. So. Definitely check that out as well. She always writes really good articles there. Really interesting because, like, yes, everyone has a the Shanghai Dragons lost again article, but there's not a lot of stuff on these, like, not obscure, but, like, very specific topics. So
the other side of Overwatch League sort of thing.
But let us move on here. And, I mean... This isn't really a break it down, but I'm playing the drum. Whoa, the music went way low. Oh, I know why. Because I did that thing. So everything sounds good for you guys. It just sounds really low for me right now because I'm an idiot. But we're going to be playing... No, it's good. We're going to be playing a new game that we alluded to earlier. That is going to be Win, Lose, or Draw. As we're going to go through all of the teams from Overwatch League Season 1. And we're going to tell you if they have won, lost, or drew their off-season moves and changes.
Spoiler alert, nobody drew. But the game sounds terrible.
The option could still happen in the future.
It's true. We haven't decided these yet.
This isn't a one-off.
It's not written down.
Also, if you disagree, let us know in the comments.
You know what? I'll change it. There's a draw. Another.
Okay. Be soft. Okay. Let's start here. Speaking of not having a draw, let's talk about our first team here. We're going to go with, this is in the order of how they placed in the season, isn't it?
It is.
Smart.
Yes.
We're going to start with the number 1 team, the team that won the Overwatch League Season 1 championship. And that, of course, is the sad boys. London Spitfire here. They have lost Closer, and they've gained Guard, who's the DPS for Element Mystic, and Krillin, support player from the Abyss.
A little bit the Abyss. Yeah, I couldn't find a firm accounting of where he came from. I think he was like a ladder signing or something like that. Not 100% sure. That. Maybe chat can fill us in on his kind of origin stories. But this is I'll just rip the Band-Aid off.
Draw.
This is our draw. They won. How are you going to get better than this, right? They didn't even lose much in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. They did alternate Nuss and Closer a little bit throughout the entire season, but for the most part, most of their losses came before the playoff run. They released a good portion of their roster in the middle of like stage 4, at the start of stage 4, or something like that. I can't remember the exact timing. Mm-hmm. But so apparently Krillin's jumping up. Like he was below contenders on Crusher Gaming, a tier 3 team, and they're like Sean GW saying in chat here, they're hunting for their own Jonak. Anyways, they gave up very little from what they actually used to secure the championship and win the league in the first season. Just a rotational support player, and they picked up somebody that might be able to fill in for that role, but I wanted them the entire way to pick one and stick with it for a good amount of time. So I'm not going to call it a negative that they took my advice and did what I asked them to. But the additions, Guard is fine. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him if Birdring slumps again at all at any point. And honestly, he never really returned to Birdring form to me. Even through the playoffs and their run, like he solidified and he stopped being like a huge weakness for them. But I don't remember a lot of spots where he really carried and went crazy or anything like that. So I'm going to call them a draw just because they're starting 6. The 6 I've wanted them to play all first season remains intact. And they added some unknown developmental players and, a DPS that might rotate, but I don't know. We'll see.
I'm just glad they didn't add like players that they very like certainly didn't need. Like if you add an extra main tank, like kind of giving an illusion or a foreshadowing here for maybe another team we're going to be talking about. But we've seen teams like, oh well, they already have 2 main tanks, so why did they sign a third one? Or like, they've got. I guess you can move DPS around, but like they already have a DPS.
Nice shot at Boston there with the main tank thing. I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, they have Gesture. Obviously, like arguably one of the best, if not the best, main tank. Like they're at least not setting themselves up to accidentally not play him, which is great. That in and of itself might be a win in my book. But let's move on here and talk about the second place team in the season. That, of course, is the Philadelphia Fusion. They lost a big number of players here. Shadowburn, Joe Meister, Dayfly, and Hotba, of course. They gained Elk as a 2-way player. Of course, the support for Fusion University. Death, you've got this one billed as a win here. Explain yourself.
Sure. So they're getting closer. Okay, so they weren't using him. So, in the event that EQO needs a break or anything like that, they'll be worse off for having lost Shadowburn. But cutting Shadowburn, as talented as he is, wasn't a negative for this team because EQO was as good as he was throughout his time in the first stage or in the first season. So I'm going to kind of give him a pass on Shadowburn, though he is a really good player. I think it's better for everybody here that he gets released. Joe Meister, Dayfly were not used, very seldom used. Joe Meister never touched the stage at any point during the season. Dayfly did a couple of times, didn't really show much or do much with his opportunity. So no issues there. And they added a good depth at a position that, they needed now that Joe Meister stepped away. Also, they solidified their tier 2 team, which doesn't really matter here, but I do like that they did that. Giving a star player their livable full-time wage is definitely a positive for me. Yeah. But the main reason that I'm calling this a positive, and it's a very small win, is just that trading Hotba gets them closer to the correct tank configuration that I want to see them in, which always includes Poco. And then I don't know, we're going to have to see what goes on with Sato and Fraggy, but I do want to see Fraggy get back in there and become the starter for this team. And I think that this signals that.
Right.
Right. I think this signals that a little bit. Sato didn't quite work out the way we wanted to. Let's keep you on the bench for a little bit. Maybe a team needs a main tank later, something like that. Maybe there's another trade in the works for them. But either way, I think Sato was fine. He just wasn't a playmaker like Fraggy was. And I didn't see the exchange there as a positive one for the team. Just because you got a little more defensive of a main tank doesn't mean you got a better one. Sure. So yeah, I think this just brings them a little closer to what I want their roster to be going forward. It's a very small win, but a win nonetheless. I think.
I like it. I mean, not like keeping Fraggy on the roster in my mind is a win in and of itself. But in all seriousness, like he could theoretically, like I think I agree with you that like him being on the roster right now shows that he is going to see some minutes, which is nice because like. They could have kept Joe Meisters too, right? Like they could have theoretically never played, but like it shows
they didn't have to trade Hotba. They didn't get a player back. This was through an expansion team. They sold
your teams. Yeah, exactly. You don't need to. They're not keeping the players that they don't think they're going to play. Yeah. I think Shadowburn potentially has value as backup for EQO, but I think for Shadowburn's sake, it was good to trade him.
Yeah, this to me, and also for theirs too, right? Because they have to pay these players, and if they're not using him, he's almost certainly being paid more than your league minimum going in to the league. At least I would think so. And just these moves strike me as what a savvy team would do, right? Like I just feel like they're on the right track, doing what they need to do, getting rid of talent, even if it's good talent that they weren't going to use and wasn't going to help their roster from a day-to-day perspective. So, yeah, I just think they're getting closer, and I think the moves they're making are positive, and they seem to have a plan, and they're executing it. So I like that.
For sure. Definitely like it. Bright future, I think, for Season 2 for Philadelphia Fusion. Moving on here, we have the real winners of Season 1, New York Excelsior. They lost Janice, so win already. Doesn't matter what the rest of it is. But they added Flower, of course, and Nene. I got drops for him too. So a short list right here. I agree with you. It's a win here. But any other thoughts?
An on-paper win is what I'm going to call this one. So the main tank, right, like you said, whether Janice is the best main tank in the league next season or not, this was the correct move for the New York Excelsior. He didn't fit with their roster. He didn't fit with their game plan. He came in for one game mode. It didn't work out. I think the team plays better with Mano. So I'm glad they cleared up the room and made space to allow Janice to find a new home. So he'll be in Washington. And then the additions, listen, I'm not going to call it a negative to sign two players the caliber of Flower and Nene. Doesn't have to be a positive though either, Blevins. They can mismanage this. They can use them at the wrong time. They can substitute too much. There's a lot that can go wrong here. Or they could just trade Nene and do what they should do and what we talked about the Philly Fusion doing for Shadowburn. And please trade him. He's too good to be on your bench. I don't see him taking.
I think this, even more so than the argument for London, is an argument for a draw here. I think this is close to a draw because
it is.
It's diminishing returns to add that many DPS players. We talked about this already, and we're going to be talking about it again unless NYXL does some more swaps, like having Pine, Libero, SBB, Nene, and Flower all on the same team at the same time. Hello, that's 5. There's one extra player, Jonak. There's 6. What about all the other? What about Arc? What about like? You can't do that. So there's going to be like this shows that NYXL is going to have top tier quality DPS players on their bench. Now we've already seen Pine on the bench. I think Pine plays better as that kind of wild card. Okay. What about Nene? What about Flower? Is SBB going to transition to that role depending on the meta? Like, I don't mind, like, having those players on your team, great, that's awesome. But like, is having those players on your bench better than developing other positions? Is it better than getting roster and capital space? Like, what I'm wondering is the question. So I kind of want to peg this. I mean, obviously, I think trading Janice is a win in and of itself, but I think on a more serious note, the addition of 2 top tier players, I think ironically pushes this closer to a draw for me.
It's definitely close, and I think the most of the reason I'm calling it a win is the tank choice, right? Like the moving Janice. And then I don't think it's going to work to have those 5 DPS players all on your roster and to rotate them.
Right.
But I also can't definitively say it can't, right?
Right.
Like, like with the right group of 5 guys and the right meta and the right circumstances, it could certainly be the correct move. But I just think it's so narrow. And like you said, the key phrase you used is diminishing returns. How much are you paying Nene to not really help your team too much? Also, where's your academy team? Is he on a 2-way? I would love to know that because they do have an academy. So he's not, right? Because they called him up from there. Is he on a 2-way? That could be. But even then, I don't know. It's a little strange to me. But we'll have to see. I think they put out their roster for XL2 though, and I don't think Nene was listed. So I think that basically puts that to rest. But I don't know. We're seeing a lot of teams stack up DPS players, and so far it's not super worked for the other ones. Granted, 2 of them are new to the game. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Mike OW in the chat brings up a point I was just going to mention, is that people are rumoring that Nene is going to be an off tank.
Yeah,
that I think pushes it definitively to a draw. If you're setting up a star player like Nene to be your off tank, like, you just threw it away anyway. That's actively bad, I feel.
I can go write a Reddit post right now that says that Jake is transitioning to main support and is going to take Bonnie's spot on the roster. It doesn't make it true. Listen, I understand Nenny's played some off tank in the past. There's no reason to me, and there might be one exception, and we'll get to that with the next team here. There's one exception, but there's no reason to expect a player to do any form of role swap like this. There's just I don't see it as a benefit. Role swaps are born of necessity. Soul thinks their season is crashing down around them. They can't find a main tank player that does anything, so just throw Jaehong at it and see if it works. Oh no, we literally don't have an off tank player. Siegel, can you please learn the role quick? That's the only time it's worked, by the way. And even then, look what happened to the player. He's now gone, right? Because he's like in between roles. What does he do? Does he find a new home? I'm just going to go stream. There's no reason to expect role swaps from these players, and I just, on spec, deny all of them. Until we see them happen, there's just no point in having that conversation. It would be like discussing how DeFran would do in Overwatch League if he got signed to Atlanta before that announcement actually happened.
Or after yikes.
Until it happens, I just I can't imagine him doing that. He earned his spot in the league by being a DPS player.
Right.
Would he tell New York he'd do it in order to join the team? Sure, but wouldn't they just go sign literally whatever off-tank player they wanted?
Just take
to do that?
An actual off-tank player. Don't pay Nene to a DPS player to be your off-tank. Just get a good off-tank. Now, maybe he is a good off-tank. Okay, maybe I just don't know enough about him as a player, but like,
a lot of these guys could probably play more than one role, but it's just a matter of why would you? Your reputation is here. If you switch to that role and you flop, you're done, right? Like, how's Taimu look right now? Because he went to tank for a minute. Like, we don't talk about Taimu like a serious, overpowered player on the roster anymore, like we did going into season 1. And in part, that's because he spent a good portion of the stage flopping around on Winston and not getting anything done while his team lost around him. So
he was really good on fantasy points, though, because the glitch in the system, they never stopped him. So
that was phenomenal.
Top tier pickup there. But we don't want to spend too much time on each team. I think we've covered that. The NYXL right now is the biggest enigma, I think, of the season 1 teams. I, as a fan, hope that there's some more changes potentially, or at least some clarity. So, moving on here, we've got the Los Angeles Valiant, and they're going to start off our first loss here. They lose soon Finzi, Milton, aka Numlocked, and Verbo, and they gain Kuki at the main tank. I mean, losing one of your star DPS players and soon and gaining a main tank does not seem like the path to victory here.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions I have on this team. Can Bunny be as solid of a tracer player for the LA Valiant as Soon was? Again, I don't think Soon was necessarily top tier at any of the particular heroes that he was responsible for, but the team was successful when using him.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing here is you don't have to mechanically be the best. You have to work with your team, and as an end result, the 6 players that you field have to be better than the 6 players your opponents field. So until I see who steps into that role, I can't call anything the Valiant did here as a win. And they're the exception to the maybe there's a role swap, because we've seen Kareev try the role swap once already in Overwatch League. It was short-lived. It wasn't long, but the coach that they signed, and I'm pretty sure he's still there at the time, said, like, I don't understand why he plays support. Let's not do that. They did bring in Izzyaki, who might be able to take his support role, and then maybe Kareev can handle the Widowmaker or some of the hit scan that maybe I'm not super confident Bunny can handle. I don't know. Again, I'm not even predicting that to happen. I'm just saying it's the one that makes sense because we've seen it attempted, and we know Kareev has extensive hours in both. Again, he's a support player for me until he's not anymore. But that's just one of the options I see kind of on the table for this team to fill that void that Soon left. And if you do that, you're losing a solid support player. So now I'm wondering, can Kareev live up to what Soon did? And can Izzyaki live up to what Kareev was putting out? So I think it's a little overly risky. I would just try to, I don't know, they still have KSF, but I would still just try to make KSF and Bunny work out. Hopefully for KSF's sake, the next time he gets on the stage, it goes a little less disastrous than the first 2 times. The second time wasn't really fair. It was like a whole bench swap. Like that was the one time Numlock did come in the season and things like that. So it wasn't playing with a full deck. But yeah, I don't know. This is, to me, the team that has the potential to drop the furthest in the standings when I look at the moves they made.
Yeah, and this is another example of, hey, you have a world-class main tank player in Fate on your team, and your only addition here is another main tank. So really not giving me a lot of confidence here.
I'm fine with the backup. I'm fine with that addition.
Yeah.
But what about the other gaps in your lineup here? You need to me, go out and find a lights out hit scan specialist. Your Nene's, somebody like that.
Yeah.
Maybe
Nene to LA Valiant would be a pretty big game
Pine,
for them.
even Pine. Call them up. Valiant, call up the Excelsior. There's too much DPS there. Get one of them.
Oh man,
and send KSF to New York.
Flower on LA Valiant would be
send KSF to New York so I can make fun of Blevins for it.
It's going to be a no from me, dog. Moving on here. We've got the LA Gladiators, who have lost Asher, Silkred, Irie Mix, and the one and only Fissure, and have picked up Roar and Decay. This is a big shift. You're losing a paradigm player, and you're losing one franchise player and gaining a couple potentially others.
Yeah, Roar was a big main tank player for Kongdu Panthère. They were, I want to say, second place, if I'm remembering correctly, in contenders last season in Korea. These two were both, Decay and Roar were both from Kongdu. It's going to be really interesting to see. There's no player that they could have signed except for Gesture, where I wouldn't have called it a negative to lose Fissure, right? Like it's just the only way. So there's no reason this can't work out. There's no reason the Gladiators can't be a better team. But on paper, and that's what we've done for all these, it's just surface glance.
All we've got right now is paper.
You've lost the best main tank in the world.
Yeah.
And you've signed 2 highly sought after prospects. So I think there's a good chance this does work out. But nonetheless, I cannot say Roar equals Fissure until I see it. And a side note there, the Gladiators had to get rid of Fissure. I'm not blaming them for doing it.
Right, but it did happen.
If you can't show up to the playoffs and you can't play for my team in the playoffs, if it even crosses your mind, even my bench player, I want to have this mentality. I'm the best option at main tank. I'm the one you need to put in the game if you want to win. And then whatever your opinion is, you swallow it and you just do what the coaches say at the end of the day. But they all should, in their heads, I want all my players to think they're the best in the world at their role.
Right.
I want all of them to, you could be super confident, be ready to go. But yeah, you've got to show up in the playoffs. You can't abandon my team on the eve of the single elimination bracket playoff that starts up. It's a gotta go scenario. But the Gladiators are at bare minimum, I think, going to start maybe a little slower than a lot of the other season 1 teams are going to.
Sure.
But we'll see. They started slow last season too, still made the playoffs. So we'll see if they're able to get it together, get these guys integrated and figured out. And very curious to see how the DPS rotation works with the KM.
So overall, you've got this one as a lose for LA.
Yeah, they're losing.
Yeah. I think it's close. I almost want to give this one a draw as well, but I think losing Fissure.
That's it. Without that, if they would have had like a mid-table main tank, right? And I would have been all over this as great. But
yeah. I hear you for sure. It's definitely close, though. Let us know what you think in the comments. Moving on here, we've got Deathblow's favorite team, the Boston Uprising. They lost Neko, Mistakes, Kalios, Avast, and Snow, and they've gained Blaze, who's a DPS for Gladiators Legion, Axiom, Blazy. We've got Axiom main tank for Toronto Esports. We've got Color Hacks, DPS from Toronto Esports as well, and we've got Fusions, who I believe is on a 2-way contract here. Fusions is the main tank was the main tank for British Hurricane, obviously the biggest brain in the World Cup.
900 IQ main tank in the World Cup for sure. I'm calling this a loss across the board. It's too much turnover to me for a playoff team. There's turmoil in Boston. Something is afoot. They're what's happening with their academy team? This team's distracted. That's factoring in here a little bit. On the surface, I think Blase is fine. I think the combination of Blase and Color Hex might fill in for He Who Must Not Be Named adequately. Like kind of the two of them combined should fill the hero pool that he had. And I'm hopeful that works out. As far as the rest of it goes, I mean, Kalios to me was an option, and I think he was so well known for his Zarya play, and so I think you kind of lost yourself your Zarya specialist, your Houston Outlaws spree player that could come in and make a big impact there. But the rest of it, it's just more about how much turnover we had for how successful we were. They're only even cutting. Neko was their starting support player to me. I know Aim God came in and played pretty well, but did Mistakes need to leave? Is that a thing? Maybe he wanted to. I don't really know because of the turmoil, but
if you look into the whole Huck controversy thing, like I did a little bit of research on it, and I won't go into the details of it, but if you go into that, a lot of these players leaving, kind of the articles make you think that it's partly because of that and not necessarily, because like Mistakes came in a really bad scenario and performed very well. Kalios also fine. Neko was a starter and was good. I mean, Avast and Snow never played, or played very little at most. So those ones make sense. Neko, Mistakes, and Kalios are all kind of like And then Fusion's obviously great player. We saw him, kind of at the biggest stage he's been on, play very well. And then, the other players are fine, but yeah, I think I agree with you here. I call this one a loss overall. I don't think that they lost players because they weren't performing or because they got something great out of it. I think they lost players because the players wanted to leave.
Yeah, they might not have lost players because they wanted to release them. They might have lost them because the players wanted out. And I touched on it briefly earlier and kind of teased it, but Gamzu's not on the lost list, but they sure did add 2 main tanks. So now you've got 3 main tank players and Gamzu, Axiom, and Fusions. Yeah. And Fusions is on a 2-way, fine. he's still on your roster. He still counts towards your 12. So I guess I don't really fully understand that. Also, congrats on your two-way player. Let me know when you have an academy team, because you don't anymore, because they ran away.
Yes.
It went clinically insane and ran away, I guess is the better way to put it. And that's not a knock on Boston. I want to be clear. Everything, all the turmoil, all that stuff, the Toronto esports losing their mind and turning into a bunch of weirdos and basket cases is a completely separate thing that wasn't Boston's fault, other than they contracted them and then the team lost their mind. So they still have all their two-way players, right? They're still going to find a new academy team and everything like that. But like, well, who's Fusion's playing with right now? What's he doing?
Boston Uprising, I guess.
Right. I would guess that's the only thing he could do is sitting in on scrims, things like that. But so yeah, I don't know. It seems, unlike the Philadelphia Fusion, who had a good amount of turnover for where they were, they're losing players that had stage time. Like 3 of the 5 players here played a solid chunk of time. Kalios less than the other 2. But yeah, so I don't know. This doesn't line up to me. It seems like they're reactionary. They're still like trying to fill the void from Dreamcast leaving, and then they just signed a couple main tank players because they didn't know what else to do. Yeah, I don't know. They seem a little bit lost, but again, the starting 6 they're going to field for season 2 is fine. I don't have much of an issue with that. I think they're a solid team going in for season 2, assuming Blase and or Color Hex fill in the DPS role adequately, or preferably better than adequately for them. But yeah, I don't know. I think they're okay, but on paper they're just such a mess, and everything's so up in the air with them. I have no idea where to put them right now.
Any roster that's fielding Striker, I'm gonna give a puncher's chance in any given scenario.
Striker Gamzu combo is really strong for any dive-ish, anything close to a dive meta. So hopefully it works out for them.
But in terms of their off season specifically, we're gonna chalk that one up as an L. Moving on to Deathblow's actual favorite team, we've got the Houston Outlaws, who have lost Mendo, your boy Clockwork, and Fact Fiction, and they've gained a Tracer player in Dante from the San Francisco Shock.
Oh.
Now, you asked me this before the show to make sure that you weren't a homer, and I agree wholeheartedly. This is just a straightforward W.
This is a solid win.
This is a solid
Mendo
W.
Kusai and Clockwork were benign tumors. Scratch that. Mendo Kusai was a benign tumor.
I was going to say Clockwork
was malignant because they were using him.
Yeah.
And then Fact Fiction, listen, they lost a quality off tank or quality main tank backup. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, but there's no way they wanted to use him over Muma. Muma's their guy. I love that they kept their core together for the most part. This was a playoff team if they had a Tracer player going into the first season. They didn't, so here we are. Now they went and found one that had half plus the season for the San Francisco Shock. He was the standout player for them a good portion of that time. I think there's no reason to think he can't adequately and excel, adequately play the Tracer role, if not excel at it. And I think he also brings some flexibility there. So now, listen, Jake might not like it, but he might not be the best Doomfist on the Houston Outlaws anymore. There could be some other spots where maybe he comes in. It's so hard to tell because since Dante lost his starting spot on the roster is like right when you stop just auto picking the Tracer and rolling out with it, so I'm not super confident in his flexibility. We see it, he streams a ton. He's got like the top 2 accounts, I want to say, not too long ago were his on the leaderboard. Mechanical skills not a problem here. He's got a decent hero pool. His Sombra is very, very good, as well as his Tracer. That's what we've seen a lot on stage. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really obviously very excited about the Outlaws prospects going into next season.
Yeah, very solid W. And we got to talk to Dante at Blizzcon, which was fun.
We did.
Moving on here, we've got Soul Dynasty, and they made some big changes here as well. They lost Kuki, Zephyr, Miro, Guido, Weekheed, and Gambler. Have gained the one and only Fissure from LA Gladiators, of course. Michelle, an off-tank from Lucky Future Zenith. Marvel, or Marv1, the main tank from Lucky Future Zenith. And Jexy, main support from Element Mystic. I mean, they gained Fissure, so it's obviously a win here. But any other things to note on?
Well, listen, like you said, they added in a player that they desperately needed. They had no acceptable main tank options. Miro and Kuki both didn't live up to what they wanted. So Fissure was an absolute must. And for the regular season, at a bare minimum, they picked themselves up a phenomenal main tank player. We'll see how he's feeling when the playoffs roll around if they get there. But as far as the other ones go, I think they're just supplementing. These are, there's a real chance that the Jexy takes the job of the main support. I think him and Jaehong could be really strong. I also think the off tank Michelle is a decent chance to make their way in, and Marvel's just going to be backing up Fissure. I don't think there's really any doubts about that.
But this is the Seoul Dynasty, who we saw do just about as crazy of roster swaps as we could see.
Yeah. But with the exception of with the ever present, always there, I'm going to stop saying it soon, I promise. Caveat that Contenders players might fall flat on their face. I think these are as solid of additions as you could have asked for, given the talent pool. There's not, I keep saying it, but it's not like there's just a slew of. You don't want to just sign everybody that was cut from Overwatch League. They're not just better, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I think Michelle and Fissure have the best chance to really impact this roster. Obviously, Fissure alone might be enough. In the same way that I think, Dante on Houston in Season 1 would have made them a playoff team. I think Fissure on Seoul makes them a playoff team last season.
Certainly a good shot at it.
Thank God the playoffs are getting bigger, Blevins, because I got two teams I want to add into them based off their additions.
I like it. Next up, we've got the San Francisco Shock, who have lost Dante. Of course, we just talked about that. IDDQD, Nomi, and Dahak. They've gained Smurf, who's a main tank for GGEA. Rascal, the most courageous player to play or to field as a team. Don't be cowards. And then Vile L2T, Violet. Flex support for O2 Ardiant. What are we thinking here?
Yeah, listen, I think all three of these players have flashed in a big way, the additions, right? Like, Smurf was one of the best players on GGEA. I think it was like him and Sharp that were the real standouts for the Outlaws Academy team. Rascal, we've seen time and time again. The guy is a super high skill player with a huge hero pool. If he can not get cut from his third team in 2 seasons, I think that would be great. It didn't make any sense to me that Dallas let him go last time around. It had to have been a locker room thing. Hopefully that's not a trend. That's the only way I think Rascal can be a hindrance, is if he's a distraction in the locker room. And then Violet could easily, he was a very highly sought after, very well respected flex support player from Contenders. I think there's a decent chance, especially, not naming any names here, but we heard a little bit when we were at BlizzCon talking to some people. Sleepy might not be the best guy to have in the locker room. Might be a little on the toxic side. Not really kind of the attitude you want around. So maybe that wore on them as the season went on, and they're looking for a possible replacement. I really don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That's definitely going to be a big position battle to watch to me as we go into Season 2.
Yeah, that's a big one.
What they lost, they didn't need Dante. As good as he is, I think he's pretty close to on par with Sinatra. They just didn't need him. And then IDDQD, they proved they didn't need him by playing in one map. Then Nomi and Dak had to go. They were very subpar performers in the initial season. So I think they did some addition by subtraction here. They moved their assets around. Again, this is another team that I think made savvy moves that look like they're attacking this the right way. Go figure, being owned by a professional athlete puts you in a decent spot.
Yeah, having a lot of sports organization folks in the organization, maybe they're making some good strategy plays here. Speaking of strategy plays, or not of strategy plays, potentially, let's talk about the Dallas Fuel, who lost Coco, Chips Hyan, and Siegel, of course. They gained closer support from Spitfire, obviously, and RCK, off-tank for Giganti.
Yeah, listen, RCK might be fine. I don't have much of an issue with that. I'm not excited about it, but I'm not knocking them for it. What they got rid of it's really unfortunate they lost Siegel. There's just no two ways around it.
Right.
There was no reason to keep Coco. He went to a coaching role, so they still have his brain, if I'm remembering correctly, which is good. You know,
yeah.
He's been around. He's been around with
robot now.
He's been around with this core of this team for a long time, so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great to be able to keep him around in that coaching capacity. Chips is unfortunate. Really high mechanical skill, really low communicative skill. So I'm fine with that. They had to make a decision.
Old guard dying a little bit.
Right. They had to make a decision there, and they decided to keep Unco and roll with that rather than Chips. Judging by season 1 performance only, I think that was definitely the right call. The main reason I have him marked as a loss here, Blevins, is because I don't know who their DPS edition is yet. Right now, I don't see anybody on the roster that can play projectile, at least that usually plays projectile. There's rumors of Zachary going there. Last I checked, he was a hit scan. You know, they have players on the roster I was hoping they would get rid of that they didn't. I'm gonna not factor in not cutting effect here, because so far it seems like he's been around. He's been with the team for a while now.
Yeah.
Hopefully things have stabilized for him.
Been playing Ash.
I'm gonna lean on. They've decided to keep him, so I'm just gonna lean on the whole he's here. He's got his job back. Everything. I lean.
Yeah, there you go. We got there.
But yeah, so I want to say they need to make more additions to me. They didn't replace what was lost. Siegel was arguably, if not definitely, their best player in season 1. And I'm not sure that they adequately replaced either of the 2 roles that he filled for that team.
Sure.
So yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So yeah, Dallas Fuel. I think they offhandedly mentioned, or maybe it was Hastro that mentioned, that there's still more changes coming, but like I don't take anything that he says seriously ever, especially on Twitter. So let's.
You're not wrong, but it makes sense. There would be another edition, a DPS edition coming
for sure. Almost to the end here, we've got the Florida Mayhem, who have lost, unfortunately, Mr. Logix, Manitin, Swoosh, Zebasai, Zuppe, Zappis. They have gained Apply, who's a two-way player, DPS, of course, from Mayhem Academy. Hagopyun, support from London Spitfire. Chris is support from Meta Athena. BQB, a DPS from X6 Gaming. And Swan, main tank for NRG. What do you think?
Calm down, Sean. I'm going to give you guys a win. We got somebody in chat very nervous about what we're going to say for the Florida Mayhem.
I agree.
The reason you get a win is because you were so awful last season that you needed to make wholesale changes. And while I don't agree with every single one of them, I think you could have kept Logix around if you wanted to. I also think you don't need them with Saya player around.
Right.
The one that I absolutely refuse to accept as correct is Zappis going away. I don't think they adequately replaced him. I don't know, like they just didn't quite fill that.
Manitin was good for them.
Manitin and Zappis, I think, would have been fine, and they just didn't keep either of them. Some of the only ones I really would have wanted to keep were those two. Zappis never got his chance. He was the one time I remember him being out there was they threw him out for a Hollywood map. And they said their reasoning was, well, listen, we're just so bad at Hollywood that we thought, it's not going to get any worse.
You haven't been playing with us, so you must be doing something different, right?
Right. And it's one of those things we've talked about it a lot during the season. Put your players in a situation to succeed. It's not a situation to succeed. It's a situation to just add and compound the failure that was the Florida Mayhem's inaugural season.
Shift the blame.
Right. Hagopin is an obvious upgrade at support. I'm going to say Chris is an upgrade at support, even though I don't know that I've really seen him play very much. But I know what they had last season.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if Swan can take over as the main tank. I was far from impressed with Awesome Guy. Mm-hmm. But I think a wholesale swap was what was needed here from Florida, and it's what we got. Mm-hmm. So there's room to go down in the standings. That's what happens when you add new teams, but there's still not a lot. Right. So I think hopefully we can start to see some improvement here from them, some development, some upward momentum instead of just the constant deadpan. We like our players belong here for the most part, but we're not good as a team, so we're just gonna fold. That's what we need to see change from them. So they needed some big changes, and they got.
I agree with your Manitin Zappos estimation here. Zebo and Zuppe just straight up were just not great support, so huge upgrades there. Logix, I'm not even necessarily surprised that he didn't stay on the Florida Mayhem. I'm just surprised he hasn't been picked up somewhere. Like he had such like high spikes of power. Like he did really well.
He finished strong, but I think people forget, and with recency bias, just how terrible he started. Like it was honestly really rough for them. We also forgot to list Zephyr as an addition. I think he qualifies. He was just like a little bit before them, but yeah, I forgot to list Zephyr as the off tank. Sure. Just less consistent to me than Zappos or Manitin would be to have just kept them around. I think they did overthink themselves in that one role, and we know there was some confusion with timing with Zappos, and did he try out, did he not? I don't really know. I don't really care. They had him around for a good amount of time. They should have known they didn't want to get rid of the guy, so we'll see. Whether it yields results or not, this franchise needed a new direction, and they're headed in it.
I'm interested to see how Tavik is going to work in this roster. I'm very interested to see it. Moving on, last and also least, we've got the Shanghai Dragons, who lost Zusu, Rosha, and Altering, 5K, Freefeel, Sky, Ado, and Damon. And they gained DM from Lucky Feature Zenith, Diding, Youngjin, Diding, Youngjin, Luffy, and Koma from Kongdu Panthera, as well as Guardian from Toronto Esports. I mean,
you forgot to say the lull.
I'll
handle it when you don't, though. Whenever you say Toronto Esports, but yeah.
Lull.
Another team in the same vein. I mean, I could just copy paste my analysis from the Florida Mayhem. Speaking of a team that needed a whole new direction. This is one that needed it more than Florida, because this is one that couldn't even beat Florida. So what they've done is they've gone and pulled in the core from Kongdu Panthera. They're going to apparently try to make it work with Fearless as the main tank there. I don't think they've signed any other main tank options. And that, I think, is ultimately going to be what keeps them from being significantly improved. At least in the metas we had in season 1, main tank play really drove the success or failure of the team more than anything. So I really think there's a good chance that maybe Fearless just isn't, it is what we saw in season 1, but it's hard to lay all of that at his feet. And I'm willing to be optimistic when I look at this team's prospects and just say, hey, if you're not playing with a full deck, it's hard to win too many hands. So we'll give him a shot and see what he does. I'd love to see a backup option for Fearless here, though. And then if he doesn't work out and if he's not playing well, then not need to wait until the acquisition period to add somebody in here. I don't know why nobody's had this epiphany in the Shanghai organization that
it's because
maybe we need a backup for the guy
long enough to learn stuff.
Yeah, when your whole roster is question marks, how do you not have backups for everybody? I just don't understand.
Whole coaching staff.
Right. So I'm going to call it a win, because they went from an 0-40 team to a team that I don't know where they're going to finish and how they're going to do. So that's all already.
Well, for what it's worth, that's exactly how they started season 1 as well. No one had any idea. They literally averaged out to exactly the middle in our preseason power rankings, which we will, I'm sure, be getting to in a few weeks, maybe. Who knows? We'll definitely try to get you that, because that was fun to do and talk about. But that's it, guys. That's our win, lose, draw for the season 1 teams. I'm sure we'll find other spots to incorporate this game. Let us know what you thought. I like it. I think it's fun. It's a nice little talking point. Let us know what you thought about them. And who do you agree with? Is there anyone that we got horribly wrong? Is there anything that we messed up? Let us know in the comments below. But
also, look for the end of the expansion team. We don't know for sure when Washington's going to announce, but we do think we have word that the Vancouver roster will be announced by next episode. So look forward to that next week. We'll give you Washington's as well if we have it. And if we do have it, maybe we'll do a power rankings game for expansion teams only, something like that next week. As soon as we have all the expansion team rosters, we'll be doing that episode. So
yeah, once we get the stuff, we'll talk about it, guys. Don't worry. Don't worry. We'll talk about the stuff when it happens. We just can't make up stuff. I mean, we could. That's not our job. That's
other people do, though.
Not going to name names here.
You
know exactly who I'm talking about.
And read it on Reddit.
But that is going to be it, guys, for the episode. Death, any last minute stuff that you want to go over here?
No, I'm already mentally drafting an artifact. Already.
Same. So that's going to be it, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Let us know what you thought about the game. You can check out all of our stuff over at highnoonpodcast.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/highnoonpodcast. You can join the awesome ranks of awesome people like Hippo over at patreon.com/highnoonpodcast. Helps us out a ton. All that good stuff. We're also now on Spotify. So if you've been listening to this on something else, and you don't like it, and you like Spotify, but you were like, man, I can't listen to High Noon Podcast on Spotify because they're not on Spotify. Wrong. We are on Spotify. So definitely check us out there. But that is going to be it, guys, for Deathblow. I'm the Blevins. And remember, it's High Noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change